channel, and welcome if you're new. I'm Holly and I'm very happy to have you here today. So today is a Crocktober collaboration. So we get to share with you all kinds of crockpot slow cooker meals, and I think that you're going to find lots of great ideas and recipes that you can make for your family. So I'm going to leave the playlist down below of all my YouTube friends who are making some really delicious meals for this, so please be sure to check that out. And it is being hosted by Sammi at Managing the Maze and Tamara at Southern Wife Everyday Life. And they both have great content on their channels, lots of cooking, grocery hauls, what I cooked for dinner type videos, prepping, and homemaking type videos. So please be sure to go and check their channels out. I'm going to leave their links down below in the description box as well. And I know you will love their channels as much as I do. And now I'm going to show you what it is I made for this Crocktober collaboration. So I hope that you find lots of great recipes that you can make for your family, and I hope that you enjoy the video. This first recipe is a slow cooker garlic and Parmesan chicken. Really easy to make and pretty much simple ingredients and pretty healthy as well. You will need 1 onion diced up, a half a cup of Parmesan cheese, and I'm using the grated, and 1 cup of evaporated milk, half a cup of chicken broth, 2 tablespoons of melted butter, 3 tablespoons of flour, and for the seasoning it's a half a teaspoon of garlic powder, a fourth of a teaspoon of pepper. It called for a teaspoon of, or a half a teaspoon of salt. I'm using an eighth because we don't use a lot of, try not to use too much salt in our recipes. And it called for 4 cloves of garlic. I used probably about 6 because we love garlic, so that's up to you how much you want to use. Also 8 ounces of sliced mushrooms, and that is optional, so if you don't like mushrooms you can absolutely leave that out. And 3 ounces of coarsely chopped spinach, and I used baby spinach for that. I'm using 3 chicken breasts, and I cut those in half so to make them thinner. It called for, I believe, some fillets, like 1.5 pounds of chicken breast fillets. So basically that's what that is. Just cut them thinner. And I did add some garlic powder to the chicken. I always feel like it helps to flavor the meat a little bit better. Now I did add the melted butter to the crock pot along with the onions and then the garlic. Add the chicken broth. You want to just kind of stir everything up, just to kind of, get that garlic broken up a little bit, so that way it's distributed. Then I just add those seasonings to that as well, and I will just kind of mix it up a little bit. I just like to make sure everything's distributed throughout as I'm cooking. But then add, if you're going to add mushrooms, then you would add that now. But as I said before, it's optional. You don't have to add that, because I know not everybody loves mushrooms. Also add the chicken on top of that, and you just kind of layer it just to fit it on top the best that you can. If you want, you can kind of nestle it into the mushrooms and everything. I just kind of layer it on top because it's all going to cook down eventually. It will make a little bit more juice. And I did set this on low for 3 hours, but it actually cooked about 2.5 hours for me. When you have about a half an hour left of the cooking process, you want to add the evaporated milk to a bowl and then add that flour, and you're going to whisk this together just to get it to where it's a smoother consistency. It's a thickening agent, and I usually like a cornstarch slurry for this, but I'm just following the recipe as is. So just do the best that you can to get it as smooth as you can. Pour that over the chicken, and I just took the whisk and then just kind of moved it around just to kind of blend it all together. Then I put the lid back on and put it on high for the last half hour of cooking, and your chicken should be cooked at this point. So take the chicken out after a half an hour. Then you're going to add the Parmesan cheese into this, and you want to mix it up really well. So that's why we're taking the chicken out. And add the Parmesan cheese, and you do want the powdered grated version of this. So once you mix all of that in and stir it really well, add the spinach. And this isn't going to take much longer. You want to just cook this, you want to stir everything back up, but then you will add the chicken back into this. You can leave the chicken out on a platter covered with foil to keep it warm, or put it back into the crock pot, which is what I prefer to do. So once you have everything mixed up, you're going to want to have that spinach. I like it to be cooked down a little bit more than this, so to have it where it's wilted. So I usually put it back on for about 15 to 20 minutes. You don't have to do it that long. Just cook it for however much longer you would like the texture for your spinach. So it's your choice on that. That is it for this. You just, like I said, you can keep this in the crock pot like this on warm until you're ready to serve it. Ours usually has a 2-hour warming timer. So you can make this ahead of time and then keep this warm for when your family gets home, or, you know, when you're ready to serve it. But that's basically it. I just covered it and let that spinach just kind of, you know, cook down a little bit more. I served it with some whole grain linguine and just put that sauce over it. It worked great. Really simple recipe. It does have a few steps to it, but sometimes, you know, crockpot recipes do that. It's not a dump and go. You do have to do a few things, but I think it's worth it. And it didn't really take that long to make. So a total of probably about 3 hours or so, 3.5 hours maybe. Not too bad for a crockpot recipe. And it does have garlic flavor, so if you don't like garlic, leave some of it out, but it's really good. This next one is a pork loin recipe, and this I thought was a whole pork loin, like just one roast, like a pork loin roast. It was not, it was two, so I just improvised with that. But you will need just a pork loin, and like I said, 2 works out for me as well. I find they shrink up anyway, so it'll be leftovers, definitely, or I can freeze some. But you will need either 1 or 2 sweet potatoes, and you want to just put those in, cut those up in cubes. And the red onion, you can do the same and cut it up in cubes like those sweet potatoes, but I prefer to have it in slices. Also, you will need 2 red apples, or any kind of apple that you like, and you want them 1 sliced and at least 1 chopped up. It calls for a tablespoon of honey, but I'm probably going to use a little bit more. Also some sea salt, some pepper, and some cinnamon. Now, for this, I'm going to add a little bit more. That's everything that goes with this recipe. But I'm going to add some garlic powder, some garlic and herb seasoning, and some onion powder. I just feel this helps to season this a little bit more than just the ingredients that the recipe calls for. But it's always great to make a recipe your own and do the flavors that you and your family enjoy. But take a pan and heat that up. Make sure it's hot. This is where I found out this was 2 tenderloins instead, and I just didn't realize it. On the package is what I was going off of. It said whole, so I was assuming it was just 1, and that's what it looked like. But I realized afterwards it said 2 on that packaging. So that's my mistake. I shouldn't have gone off that label. But you want to sear the pork loin on all sides first. And I started out with just adding a spray, and then I added some oil to it, regular oil, canola oil, just to kind of get it a little bit seared better. Then I just added the seasonings to it, and as I said, add what you feel your family would enjoy and what would complement the other ingredients that went into the recipe. So I just feel like this will have a little bit more flavor. Then take and cut. You don't want to cut all the way through. If you've ever done a Hasselback like potato or Hasselback chicken. That's kind of what this is as well. So you don't cut all the way through, you just cut halfway through till you almost get to the bottom. And then you're going to add, and I did add a little bit of seasoning to, before I added the apples to this, I added a little bit of the garlic seasoning to it because I just feel like it needs to have that. I don't know, that's just me. But you'll see me do that here. I just add it into those slits because I don't want just the apple flavor. I want to have, you know, some other flavors there as well. So once you do that, then I just added the apples. So just cut up some apple slices and put in, you kind of have them in half. So put those into the slits. And as I said, if you ever made a Hasselback potato or anything, you kind of know how to do this. But simple, easy, and this will help get those flavors in there a little bit more. And I almost forgot to show you that you need to put the sweet potatoes, the apples, and the onions on the bottom of the crock pot first. And I did sprinkle just a tiny bit of just some cinnamon on top. You don't have to do that. I just felt like it would be a nice little flavor there. You can add salt and pepper if you want as well. Then I added the pork loin on top, and now I'm going to add, the recipe called for a tablespoon of honey over the top of the pork loin. Since I'm having 2 of them, I decided just to go ahead and add 2 tablespoons, so 1 for each pork loin. The last ingredient you will add is the cinnamon over the top of the pork loin. Then that is it for prepping the meal. So your next step would be just to put the lid on, and you will cook this for about 7 hours on low, or you can cook it on high for 3.5 to 4 hours. And this is what it looks like when it comes out of the crock pot. But it also only took 5 hours, and it probably, if I would have kept an eye on it, it would have probably taken even less time. So pork doesn't take as long. 7 hours was a long time, at least for my slow cooker. 7 hours was just too long for that. So 5 hours was perfect. And I will say the next time I cook this, I would put this more in the juices, so that way it doesn't dry out too much, because it is, you know, cut to put those apples in. And those are those sweet potatoes. Everything was seasoned just right with the apples and the cinnamon and the honey and everything. It wasn't sweet or anything, just had a nice flavor. But this one was really a good one to try, and we just had some herb and butter instant mashed potatoes with it, and some corn. So this was a complete meal, really good. And this next crock pot meal is a chicken and dumpling recipe. Very simple and easy, simple ingredients. So for this you will need 1 pound of chicken breast, and I'm using 1.5 because that'll equal about a pound for me. So it just depends on the size of chicken that you have to get a pound. And it doesn't use a lot of seasoning in this recipe. So I'm seasoning the chicken breast with garlic powder, which is something I do in most of my recipes, whether or not it calls for it, because I just feel like it helps with the flavor. But you will need 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter, and I think regular butter would probably be okay with this. Also, you need 3 medium carrots peeled and sliced. I didn't have any regular carrots, so I'm using baby carrots, and I just cut those up into smaller pieces so they will cook a little bit quicker. Also, 1 small onion chopped up, 1 large celery stalk, and you want to just slice that up as well. 1 cup of all-purpose flour, and you will need that so we can dredge these buttermilk biscuits in that flour. So you need 2 cans of buttermilk biscuits, 1 can of chicken broth, and I'm using the less sodium version, and that's another reason I'm going to add some salt and pepper to this recipe. But cream of chicken soup is what you need. I like to use the cream of chicken with herbs because it just adds a little bit more flavor, and I think it's going to need it since it doesn't call for a lot of seasoning. But put your chicken in your crock pot. Then you will add the melted butter, and then add the 2 cans of the cream of chicken soup. And just try to get everything out as much as you can. Add the chicken broth, and then add the onions. Now, this is probably at this point in the recipe where it says just to cover it and cook it for 4.5 hours and wait to add those last 2 ingredients, the carrots and the celery. I decided I'm just going to throw them in. Even though this is being cooked on high, I just don't want to have that extra step. So I added that in. I'm adding the salt and some pepper. So, and you can add whatever seasonings you want to this actually, and make it your own. And that's what recipes are for. So they're great to experiment with. But I'm just stirring everything up just to make sure everything gets fully incorporated. Then you will cover this, and it says to cook on high for 4 to 4.5 hours or low on 8 hours. I'm doing this on high, and instead of the 4.5 hours that it said, I decided to reduce the time to about 3.5 hours. I'm going to check that since I'm at home, I'm not away at work or anything. I'm going to reduce it to 3.5 hours and then just check it. If once my chicken and those carrots are done, I will move on to the next step with the biscuits. And I did cook mine for about 4 hours, so that way those carrots would cook down a little bit more. So I am glad I added that in because it did take that long for it to cook. It would not have cooked if I would have followed the recipe. So just break up the chicken the best that you can, and you can either do it in little pieces or shred it. But once you have that done, just take the biscuits and dip it into the flour, and then shake off the excess and put it into the crock pot. That flour is going to help thicken up that juice. But I had about 4 of those biscuits left, and I just felt like this was just way too many. But I was trying to follow the recipe, and I cut one into 4s and just kind of did the same thing and dipped it in. But next time I would use less than what the recipe requires. And for the rest that I had, which were 3, I followed the air fryer directions and just cook those up so that it didn't go to waste. But you just put the lid back on. You would cook it for an hour, and this is what it looks like when it's done. Really delicious. Really did enjoy this. I'm just going to use less biscuits the next time, just so that way I have more juice and everything. But definitely a keeper, and definitely one we enjoyed. Although slow cookers are great for making delicious meals, they're also great for making some delicious desserts as well. So this is a banana nut bread that I'm going to make. So you will need at least 2 cups of mashed bananas, 2 cups of all-purpose flour, a 1/4 cup of brown sugar, and 3/4 cup of granulated white sugar, 1 cup of mini chocolate chips, and I'm adding in some walnuts for this. The recipe didn't call for it, but it just kind of had some add-ins. So for this, I'm adding a 1/2 cup of chopped walnuts, a 1/2 cup of melted butter or 1 stick of butter, 2 eggs, and then you need 1 teaspoon of baking powder, a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, and a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now I'm going to show you how easy this is to make in your crock pot. Now the recipe calls for a 6-quart, and that's what I'm using, but I'm going to spray it down first with some nonstick spray. I took parchment paper, cut it in half, and I'm going to make sort of a plus sign. So make sure to spray down the crock pot first, and then lay that down. Then I'm going to add another piece, but I'm going to spray the paper first, so that way it will adhere to it. So as you can see, it kind of looks like a little, plus sign. So spray that down. So make sure it's completely sprayed. Then, and I didn't really cut the paper or anything. Put that to the side. Then take the flour that you have and your spices and everything, add that to the flour and just mix it in lightly, just so that way it's thoroughly mixed in. Then in another bowl, I added the mashed bananas, then the melted butter, and then the next thing you will add is the granulated sugar, and then add the brown sugar. And I just break it up a little bit because that tends to, get a little dry as it sits out. Once you add that, you're going to add the 2 eggs. And when I added it, I did kind of break it up just a little bit so that way it just mixes in a little bit easier. And that way everything will get thoroughly blended together. Add the vanilla. And once you have that, you want to just take a spatula or a spoon, mix it thoroughly. So just combine all of those ingredients together until you get sort of it's not going to be a smooth consistency, but a well blended consistency. Now the next step would be to add the flour, and I add a little bit at a time. I don't like to add it all at once because it makes it harder to try to incorporate everything. So once you get to the end, you will just stir that really well. And as I said, just, mix it till there's no more flour showing. Then add the chips, the chocolate chips to it. And you want to just fold it in. And once you have that, if you're going to add the walnuts to it, and that's, like I said, optional, you don't have to add the walnuts. But if you do, just fold that in with those chocolate chips. And that's it for all of the blending. Then you're going to pour this into your crock pot. And just try not to get the batter on the paper that's sticking up, because we're going to use that paper to release this out of the pan once it's cooked. Take your spatula, just spread it out as evenly as you can get it. Then cover this. And it says to cook for 4 hours on low. And I'm kind of adjusting the paper there, just that way, it doesn't fall into the batter. But cook it on low for about 4 hours. I also put a paper towel under the lid so that way it catches the condensation so it doesn't get on the bread. And I did let the banana bread cool slightly before pulling it out so that way it didn't crumble up. So make sure it cools off a little bit. And then that's the thickness that you'll get with a 6-quart crock pot. And I love how the edge is browned like that. Really delicious. Let it cool all the way before you go to cut it into, smaller pieces. But this was a very moist banana bread. Really good, and I will be making it again. So remember, your crock pot isn't just for, savory meals. It's also great for desserts. So really enjoyed this one. And I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you will enjoy all the other videos that are in this collaboration. So please be sure to check that playlist down below along with Sammi and Tamara's channels. I'll leave those links down below as well. Thank you so much for watching. I absolutely appreciate each and every single one of you. I hope that everyone has a blessed day. God bless y'all.